Welcome. This is Impact 2023, our continuing conversation where we talk about all types of topics, current events, where we talk about just topics that may be on your mind. And we talk about those from our unique perspective, Christian perspective, my perspective, and your perspective. And in order to share your perspective, we ask that you type your questions and your comments into the comment section. And as you do, we will discuss those and we will raise those in our continuing conversation. And as always, we say that this is a conversation. So we encourage you to put in your input, put in your comments and your questions so that we can know what you're thinking. It's great to know what I'm thinking, but it's even better to know what you're thinking. And so that we can have our conversation and come to some understanding about some issues. And that's why we do this. And so I don't belabor the process. I always like to just jump right into the topics. Many different ways we can go. For the past couple of weeks, we've really been hounding Florida and really talking about the issues down there and talking about what our response should be down there to some of the controversial and racist things that the government of Florida has been doing. But this week, we're not going to be there. Since then, multiple things have happened. As always, a lot of them are gun related. We've had school shootings. We've had shootings at banks. We've had shootings all over the place. And then we've had the normal shootings in clubs and at teen events and other things like that. It's just a constant reminder of the type of violence that we have in our world today, our society today. Constantly about gun control and gun violence and other things gun related, restrictions and all of that. And so as the gun debate rages on that we always have, we have some people who, multiple views. We have some people who want to have increased gun control. We have some people who don't want to have increased gun control. We have some people who just want a little bit more responsibility with guns and who can have guns. And we have some people who think that everyone should have guns all the time for no restrictions. Regardless of where you're at, that is a constant conversation point. And two events happened which added to the conversation. First event happened in Kansas City. And most of you know about this, a young boy, 16 years old, was going to go pick up his twin brothers who were at a friend's house, twin 11-year-old brothers who were at a friend's house. The wrong street, went to a house, knocked on the door looking for his brothers to pick up. And so he was at the wrong house. As a result, an 80-year-old man came to the door and shot the teen. Shot the teen in the head. 2 shots, but shot the teen in the head. The teen then says that what he did was he went to neighbors, and it went to 3 houses, knocking on doors, yelling for help. And no one came to help him. Eventually, depending on what report you hear, he basically was down on the ground, passing out. A neighbor whose house he didn't even knock on the door of heard, came out, ran over, grabbed him, held his hand, called for help. The yard he was in, the person who was in the house eventually came out with towels and everything like that. And that young man's life has been saved. The pediatrician the medical officials who tended to him did make comments. They don't know how he survived. Gunshot, bullet wound, a bullet which lodged into his head for over 12. What happened with the second shot? I don't have those details. That's the one scenario. You throw into the scenario as well that there's race. A black 16-year-old male in Kansas City was shot by an 80-year-old white man. Then you have another scenario in upstate New York where you had 4 young adults. They weren't even teens. 4 young adults were in a car. They drove to a house Again, a similar situation, trying to go to a friend's house. Not a good internet area, cell phone area. They drove into the yard in the driveway of the wrong house. Never approached the house in the sense of got out the car and gone up to the door or anything like that. They realized it wasn't the correct house. The car then drove to get out of the driveway. And while they were doing that, a gentleman came out of the house and shot 2 shots into the car, one striking a young lady and killing her. Not immediately, but they drove to the next nearest town to try to get her help. But by the time paramedics were able to get to the car, she was pronounced dead. This one, there's nothing to add on. Who just came to his, came out of his house and decided to shoot. In both of these situations, you have homeowners who, for whatever reason, defending their home, scared, whatever excuse or reason that they can come up with, decided to take the law into their hands, decided to take defense in their hands, and they used their weapons to try to murder. One successfully murdered, and the other severely harmed a young boy. And so the discussion point, and we've discussed this here before. We've discussed gun violence here before, but we've also discussed gun rights before. And as people who as people who discuss these topics, we have to come to them from a mature place. Oftentimes, when you can lump certain people together, people who are usually more conservative in their views, people who are usually more, let's not beat around the bush. Let's go straight to activists who are like First Amendment right, usually Republican, usually folk who are going to sit back here and say, well, you can't take away my First Amendment, well, not my First Amendment right, but you can't really take away my constitutional right to bear arms. And they don't want any kind of rules or regulations. They don't want any restrictions on guns at all. Then you have other groups of people, usually not Republican, either liberal, Democrat, or independent, who will sit back and say, well, there should be either some reasonable restrictions on guns. Everyone should not be able to have a gun. It should be, if you are deemed a danger, irresponsible, you should have training. There should be different requirements to having a gun. And then you have another group, again, usually more liberal, Democratic, independent, who are to the extreme, who just don't think anyone should have guns. And so you have really those groups there. And there are others, or there are a lot of people along the spectrum who think different ways. As Christians, as people who believe in God, that category. Now, if you get the typical, conservative Republican Christian, they're going to sit there and they're going to say gun rights, because that's the thing that you have to say. But we're not talking to those people. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who are just not politically one way or the other, but just common sense. And so there's this stigma that Christians believe in gun rights to the point where they don't want any, no restrictions. That's not right. Conversation we're having is as Christians. If we know that there's something out here that is harming people, killing people, causing death and pain, and our responsibility to one another, we have responsibilities to one another, to take care of our neighbor, to love one another. What is our responsibility when it comes to this gun debate? So whether or not we have rights to have guns, whether or not we can have guns, whether or not, just because you can have something and something is your right, as somebody who should be carrying into play. comment. The issue is simple. Do we have human right to live or the right to bear arms? Yeah. I think that's a good one. Right to bear arms versus the right to live. I'll say this: the bulk of the conversation that comes out is really about who should have guns and what type of guns you should have. But in these two situations, these aren't mass shootings. So these aren't the 60% of the population agrees that we shouldn't have AR-15s, because the majority of mass shootings that we've had that have been publicized, the big mass shootings, the school shootings, the bank shootings, all of these type of things, they're usually AR-15s. That's the go-to. We got two homeowners who are coming out and they're trying to murder people. Those aren't those type of situations. So usually it's, all right, do we need these war weapons? 60% of the population agree? No, we don't. This is more of a situation of who should have a gun. Should everybody be able to have a gun? Now, you can get ages and you can say, hey, look here, just like when you have a car, once you reach a certain age, maybe it's in the best interest for you to have weapons that you might need, just like a motor vehicle. You might need to have some checks, or you need to come in and make sure that you still are qualified to have this gun. And just like driving, when you get up there in age, you're going to have to come in a couple more times to renew your license. They need to make sure you're still good, because you don't need to be out there on the street causing a nuisance. And they really don't even do that much, but they do it more than zero. And because zero is what everybody should be able to have a gun to feel protected and feel valued or whatever. Then the question is, what about criminal history? Should you be what they call red flag laws that many states have instituted that, again, people fight against. And these red flag laws are, if you are a criminal or if you have been accused of certain crimes, that they can put you on a red flag list and you won't be able to purchase a gun. You won't be able to even, in some cases, have or maintain a gun. So domestic violence, or have you just shown a propensity to violence? If you have been charged with multiple crimes, to have a gun. And again, there's other people who say, no, you got to be able to have guns and protect yourself. And so the debate is there. And then it comes down to mental capacity to have a gun. If you are not mentally capable, if you have been into a mental institution, if you have some breakdowns, if you're currently going through some type of mental issues, should you then temporarily or permanently lose your right to have a gun? Those may apply to these scenarios. But at the end of the day, I don't think they do either. These two scenarios come down to two things. One, in the one situation, you're looking at, well, is this a race situation? Where you had a 16-year-old boy who was black who went up to a house of a person who was white. So you gotta look at that and address that. Is this a race thing? In the other situation, you didn't have a race issue, but you had some kids or young adults, 20, who come up to a house and they get shot at, ultimately killing. And that's just white people, both are white. So there's no race issue there. But then there's an Asian decides, I'm going to open fire. Comes down to more than that. It's just a respect issue and a what are we teaching issue. I dare say that there has been this extreme view of people having to protect their homes. What are we so scared of? And we've been building up this fear. I remember when I was a young kid, like a really young kid, I used to think that the only purpose of the news was that they can make money by scaring old people, because that's what it seemed like they did. They always crazy things happening and da 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 da. Like 60 Minutes was good at that. It was always I would watch 60 Minutes. My grandmother would watch it, and so I would sit there and I would see 60 Minutes. And as a young kid, I'd be like, Man, all they doing is trying to scare older people. That's all they want to do is scare old people. But the reality is, as much as people want to talk about video games and some of these movies and things, that older people are getting scared. And not old, I mean, we're not talking old, just older people, 50 and up, 40 and up. They're trying to scare all of them being out there partying. They're trying to scare all of us. And they're doing it through constantly barraging us with bad news, bad news, bad news. Bad news sells, bad news. But when I can give you bad news and make you scared, then I can make you buy products. I can make you buy guns, lots of guns. You can't just have guns, you gotta have bullets, lots of bullets. You can't just have that, you need to have a taser. You can't just have a taser, you need to make sure when you walk into the car, you need to have like some mace or a key thing. And then you gotta have like a high security system. Or you can't just get a doorbell, you need a Ring doorbell. And then you need cameras all around your house. And then you gotta get ADT or you gotta get some other service. You gotta make sure you got everything going on. And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so we want to build up fear. As Christians, I don't think we should be as scared as everybody else. There's a healthy amount of fear that we all should have, but we shouldn't be walking around thinking that we need to shoot up everybody. We shouldn't be walking around with that same level of fear that other people have. If that's the case, then what is the point? The saying goes for people who are in the know. You ain't a part of nothing, then you ain't got to worry about nothing. If you ain't doing nothing, you ain't got to worry about that stuff. You sitting there worrying about ain't nobody could just walking up to your door for real and just, the thing about criminals and robbers and things like that, and the stats that they always, one of the things that they always say, and the stats that they show, is that robbing is a crime of opportunity, and that opportunity is going to be what's easiest. There's not a lot of mastermind criminals out here doing the Ocean's 11, where we're planning out all of these different things where we're going to do this big giant heist. You don't see that. Criminals, people who are really robbing and stealing, they're going for whatever is easy. And so what is not easy is somebody who's sitting in their house, got it all locked up. What's easy is an empty house where people are out of town and I can go, and I'm not knocking on no door and trying to break into their house and beat up everybody and go through all this drama and possibly get shot. They running up in your house, that's because you have something up in there that you probably not supposed to have. And so there shouldn't be that fear amongst us. And again, as Christians especially, we shouldn't have that fear. So then what is the point? Why am I talking about that? Then it comes to the point of what we should be advocating for. We can't, I don't think, if guns are hurting people, our job is to love one another. Our job is to provide for one another. If we truly love those who are being hurt by these guns, then at some point we have to have an appreciation and an understanding for the fact that maybe gun hunting is a thing that people do and they should be able to hunt. Having a weapon at the house is a thing that people do and they should be able to have. But there needs to be some reasonableness to it, and Christians don't need to be on the side of blocking reasonable expectations. So if it's a step harder to get a gun than it is right now, because it's easier to get a gun than it is to get into college. It's easier to get a gun than it is to get your license to drive. It's easy to get a gun. It's easier to get a gun than it is to vote. Let's make that clear. It's easier to get a gun than it is to people who use guns and love guns. Maybe we should allow for a little bit more inconvenience if it's going to save a couple of lives. Maybe we need to have some restrictions and get rid of some of these guns because they all do the same thing. They shoot bullets. Maybe we don't need ones that shoot hundreds of bullets in minutes. Maybe we need to be on that side. And I think as Christians, our responsibility is less to the selfishness of us wanting to have what we want all the different type of guns and all the different type of abilities. And I think what our responsibility is towards others, making sure that people are safe, making sure that we care for one another, making sure that you can't say that you care for one another and things that are hurting other people, you still want to keep into place. So if AR-15s are hurting and killing, knowing that our neighbors are getting hurt and killed by them, we can't sit back and say that we shouldn't have gun regulations and that there should be some extra hoops that people have to jump through. We can't say that none of that should happen if we really truly love our neighbor and the person next door to us. And so in these situations where you have people who are coming out of their house and they're shooting folk, they're murdering folk, we need to figure out what we're doing right now is not working, and we need to do something a little different. And we can't sit back here and say, you know, hey, I'm Christian, but I'm all about this Constitution, because those two things don't make the Bible. You can't. If the Constitution is your master, then the Bible is not. The Bible is your master, and the Constitution is not. You know, you can't have two masters. That's very clear. The Bible says it. It is very clear. And so I think that's the problem that we have. We need to understand that the gun is not our master. And so I think we have to give a little, not give it all away, but give a little. We got some comments rolling in. I can get to it. Yes. There needs to be certain conditions where a person can claim stand your ground. Shooting someone when they are retreating, particularly in back, or when they're down, needs to be attempted murder. Absolutely. And the whole stand your ground, I was straight up, just stand your ground makes no sense. You used to have the duty to retreat. Stand your ground means I don't have to retreat. And so actually stand your ground needs to be eliminated altogether. If I walk up to you and I push you, and then you walk back to me, now I can stand my ground and shoot you and kill you. That whole rule and law was flawed from the jump. I don't know who was stupid enough to put that law into place, but that law is ridiculous. There should not be a stand your ground at all. But even that we got one, we need to have people smart enough to use it in an intelligent way and not, use it as a tool. If you're a judge and you know how the law was written, I don't care. You need to use that thing in a moral and in a respectful manner. And so that if somebody is running away, that is murder. That is attempted murder. Somebody when they're retreating, if you're standing your ground and they're standing their ground, you still don't have the right to shoot. They need to be attacking you. And so yes, all this needs to be attempted murder. In the one situation with the young lady, same race, 20-year-old, attempted murder. With the young black man, the 80-year-old, young black boy, haven't quite gotten to attempted murder yet. We're looking at manslaughter right now. I'm trying to work our way up, I guess. So I agree with this comment. Next one. No one should have military-grade arsenal in their possession. And I think that's the one. And I think that's the one. There are people who want to have military-grade weapons. And I can understand. They sit back there and some people are, I'm a war enthusiast, or I'm a collector, or I'm this and I'm that. Well, if you want to have one, you need to have one that doesn't work. We can have models and things like that. But I 100% agree. Hunting is what you should be able to do. You should be able to go out here and hunt. If you need a military-grade hunting rifle, you are a terrible hunter. And that's the problem. You hear stories about people I'm in the helicopter and I'm shooting buffalo or deer from the helicopter, and I got this this automatic. Come on, how is that even a thing? Like, what are you doing? But I agree. Military grade arsenal in their possession. Like, why do you need that? If you want to protect your home, you don't need that. You should not be going to war with anybody. If that many criminals are coming to your house, you got a problem. If the cartel is coming to your house, you have a problem, because that means you're involved in something that's bringing them to the house. People are not rolling up on just regular folk and just having all-out war. So yeah, I 100% agree. We shouldn't have military grade in our arsenal. You should be hunting it, or whatever reason. But they should not be military style weapons. And that's I totally agree on that. Jesus told Peter to put away his sword, and he told him, "Those who live by the sword will die by the sword." Yeah, I think that goes back to the whole point. That's right there. Jesus was right there with it when Peter decided to whip out his knife and to go at the Roman soldiers. Listen, we gotta understand that. I think we do. If you want to, don't start, nothing won't be nothing. And if you start stuff, then stuff. Live by the code of the streets, and the streets will come to you. And I think that's one of the things that we have to understand. And if Jesus said it way back then, and we still say it now, I mean, it's got to be true. And so this fear, this constant fear that these people have, and I get it. If you watch the news every day, you think that it's crazy. Other countries look at some of the stuff that's going on in the United States or some of the news shows, and they're like, man, it's crazy over there. It must be like World War III all in the United States. You can get a false sense of what's going on if you just watch the wrong thing. And so, and it's not the kids. You're sitting there, you're thinking, oh man, the kids out here wild and acting crazy. This is an 80-year-old gentleman and a 60-year-old. These are not 62-year-olds. These are not people who are young kids who we claim are listening to rap music and playing violent video games. These are adults. And it's very clear. Yes, the things that we are talking about, not having assault weapons, and maybe having some more hurdles to go through, they may not solve this particular situation. These two particular situations. Those are situations where you just had people who wanted to murder, and whatever reason or excuse that they can come up with, I was scared, or somebody came up into my yard and I'm gonna shoot. You just want to murder people at that point. You really just want to murder people. And yes, what we're talking about won't solve that. But as Christians, seeing what's going on, I think we have to be willing to, for those of us who really are into guns and gun advocates, we got to be willing to sacrifice for the greater good. We need to be willing to sacrifice for our neighbor, because that's what it's all about. If you're afraid, why open the door? Use your phone. And that's the thing. None of these people were afraid. They're going to make their excuses that they were afraid. They're not afraid. If you're afraid, you do not open the door. If there is a bear at your front door scratching on the door, you're not about to open that door because you're scared of the bear. You know what's going to happen. So clearly, if you're opening the door with your gun coming out, you're not scared, because if the bear is further down, you might open the door, but you still ain't coming out there just. You know when you're scared, because you're not going out there to confront a threat like that. And so there's a fear that you may have of, I don't know who this person is, or something may be going on, but you're in fear, in the driver's seat of fear, versus true fear, which is I'm not opening the door if there's something out there that can hurt me. And in none of these situations, it wasn't like somebody ran upstairs and shot out the window. So they were very clear. They didn't come out here and shoot some warning shots up into the air. These people were very clear on the intentions of what they were trying to do. And unfortunately, we have to be very clear and condemn that. And because our time is about to be gone, one of the things I think that we need to do is talk about this in church. I think that we need to be very clear, because many of these people are people who are going to be in church. We need to be very clear. That is not something that we should be doing. And when I say we should be doing, we should not be just shooting people who come into our yards. We should not be shooting people who just come into our house. And that seems silly, like, oh no, we don't need to talk about that. We clearly do. We clearly must. I think we have to have more of these days. Here with us it's Thursdays, but I think we need to have these conversations of where we talk practically about things to do. Let me make this sexist comment real quick, because it is. The difference between men and women, and I tell my wife this all the time, the difference between men and women is that women sometimes say things that are vague. And I say to my wife, look, you got to be very clear with me. So you can't say to me, I need you to clean up. You need to say, I want you to vacuum. I want you to wash these dishes. I want you to take out the trash. You can't say, I want you to clean up and think that everything that you want to happen is going to happen. I'm going to say that about, and that's, I think that's the way that Christians are. I think that's the way that human beings are for the most part. Sometimes in church, we get out here and we say, let's love each other. But I think we need to be a little bit more specific about what that means, because clearly some folk don't understand what it is. So we need to tell people, don't shoot folk. We need to tell people, if you want to be a Christian, you can't be racist. We need to tell people what you, or if we don't want to be that clear on what you should not do, the Bible is saying we probably shouldn't do that. You know, however we need to say it, I think we need to have those discussions, because it's not getting put across, and people are sitting here doing things and then sitting back and saying, well, I think I'm a Christian. Well, I think you're wrong. One more comment and then we got to get out of here. Many of the problems and issues we face today is summed up in how we value human life. Yeah, and I think that's where it comes down to. We don't value human life, or certain people don't value human life. And just like the other comment, I think that's one of the things that we have to say, and that's one we already do say in church, but I think it has to be a reminder. We as Christians have to value human life. And what does that mean? And what it means is human life is more important than guns. And so if you are a person who sits back and you think that guns, there should be no regulation and we should always have guns and there's nothing that we should do and we shouldn't change anything, then I don't think you're valuing human life. And you got to understand that that little piece of metal is not important, as important as the people that are out here. And we need to value human life. All right. Thank you for all the comments. This has been a great conversation. And it's a conversation I think we need to continue to have, because unfortunately, and the reason that they're not going away is because we're not doing anything about them. In the grand scheme of things, all of us, we're not doing anything about them. And so we need to continue to have that conversation, and hopefully that conversation turns into some action. All right. Thank you again for all the comments and everybody who's joined us. This has been great. As always, on Thursdays at 7 o'clock, same place, YouTube and Facebook, we have Bible study, our Thursday Thirst. This one will be a great one this Thursday. So please, everybody, tune in as we have the Reverend Cox coming in to have the Bible study this week. And also we have our Sunday service at 10 o'clock, same place here on Facebook and YouTube. All right, everyone, thank you. And join us again next week, same time, same place.